welcome to this session looking at the greening of the world's oil and gas supply chain as part of Breakbulk Europe Connect 21. We're delighted to have you all here joining us virtually today, and we really hope that you've been enjoying this session so far if you've managed to tune in, and are looking forward to today's lineup. Before I hand over to our fantastic speakers, I would first like to go over a couple of housekeeping points for this session. So firstly, this webinar will be available on demand after this session, so not to worry if you miss anything, you will be able to access the content at a later date. And our speakers are going to be available in the chat. So if you have any questions for them, please do ask them using the Q&A function on your right-hand side, and they will do their best to answer them in the chat. Any questions that we can't get to during the session, we will share these with the speakers after the session closes and publish their responses in our Breakbulk One newsletter. So this session is an extension of the coverage from our current Breakbulk magazine, which is the annual Energy Outlook issue. I'd now like to hand over to Leslie Meredith, who is the Marketing and Media Director here at Breakbulk, as Leslie will be moderating this session. Over to you, Leslie.
Thank you, Liz. Welcome to Breakbulk Connect 21. In this session, we'll be discussing the greening of the global oil and gas supply chain, an evolving trend that will impact all project cargo suppliers involved in energy projects. The inspiration for this session came from our industry publication, Breakbulk Magazine, in its annual energy issue that is available now. The world and the project cargo industry are awash with discussions about sustainability and climate change. Low carbon climate change agreements have been laid out by national, regional, and global bodies such as the Paris Agreement, the United Nations, and the International Maritime Organization, as well as mandates by the European Union and the US, which place deadlines from 2030 to 2050 on compliance. For all of these very ambitious goals, however, the understanding of sustainability doesn't move much past cutting down on high carbon fuels while encouraging renewables and electric cars. But it goes far beyond that. And most of the onus is put on producers of carbon-based fuels. But the truth is we must all do our part in protecting the environment. Bloomberg Intelligence and BNEF earlier this year launched climate transition scores to index the world's publicly traded oil and gas companies on their preparedness for a low carbon world. Bloomberg's index found that European oil companies, including Shell, Total, Gulf, Equinor, and BP, are leaders in preparedness. These five majors own some 11 gigawatts of renewable energy assets, or 78% of renewable energy assets among the 39 global oil and gas companies. Shell, which is represented here today by Beata, Global Category Manager, Warehousing and Inbound Logistics, topped Bloomberg's business model transition scores, which cover a company's business model and actions taken to adapt to a low carbon future. In her role, Beata works extensively with global third-party logistics firms, and two of her colleagues are joining us here today. We have Martyn, Regional Vice President, European Operations Industrial Projects for DHL Global Forwarding, and also Kristian Schønheyder, Head of Global Projects and Industry Solutions Norway for DB Schenker. Both of these project forwarders have worked with Shell, so today we have the unique opportunity to speak with them as a team. They'll share their perceptions in the market and their company's roles in making sustainability efforts a reality. So here we go. I'd like to start off with just a brief introduction from our three panelists. Beata, why don't we start with you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think you've introduced me very nicely and elaboratively enough, I think. Indeed, I'm here with my partners in day-to-day business with DHL and Schenker. And so straight away, I will go into Shell and what we mean by energy transition, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Perfect.
All
Sure.
right, excellent. So I actually would like to start from the energy first and then tell you a little bit about Shell and our strategy and our net zero ambition. The energy use goes hand in hand with economic activity, and it enables opportunities for growing population seeking to improve their quality of life. The challenge of transition to a low carbon energy future requires changes in the way the energy is produced, used, and made accessible to ever more people in the world, while we drastically aim to cut emissions. Today, Shell produces more than 1.5% of the world's oil and 3% of its natural gas from operations in some of the most challenging environments on the planet. Our company fuels tanks of more than 90 cars every second and refuels an aircraft every 14 seconds. Our branded retail network has around 44,000 sites. We also supply the basic chemicals that go into everyday essentials from printer ink to insulation and computers. We believe that rising standards of living for a growing global population are likely to continue to drive the demand for energy, and that is including oil and gas, and for the years to come. At the same time, technology changes, and the need to tackle climate change means there is a transition underway to a lower carbon, multi source energy system. And against this backdrop, we have strategic ambition to power the world-class investment case, thrive in the energy transition by responding to society's desire for more and cleaner, convenient and competitive energy, and sustain a strong societal license to operate and make a positive contribution to society through our activities at Shell. So in April 2020, Shell set itself an ambition to become, by 2050 or sooner, a net zero emission energy business. Most of our emissions come from the use of the energy we sell. So we must also help our customers cut their emissions when they use that energy. Emissions from our own operations make up less than 10% of our total emissions. We are taking steps to cut emissions from our existing oil and gas operations and to avoid generating more in the future. And I would like to highlight the scale of the change. Achieving our target could mean that by 2030, we are selling twice as much electricity as today, providing enough renewable electricity for 50 million households, operating more than 2.5 million charging posts for electric vehicles, increasing the amount of biofuels and hydrogen in the transport fuels we sell to more than 10% from around 3% today. This is an illustration only of the scale of the change to come. How we change our business will depend on our customer needs. And I wanted to also tell you a little bit about Shell New Energies. So Shell New Energies business will have an important role. We plan to invest at Shell 1 to 2 billion US dollars per year on average in new energies until the end of a decade. And as the energy transition unfolds, we must continue to improve, of course, our fuel and lubricants to ensure maximum efficiency in traditional engines as well. And over the time, new fuels will become increasingly important for Shell, including low carbon biofuels, hydrogen, and battery power. And by staying close to our customers and co-innovating with them, both on energy and decarbonization, we will find specific solutions. With each sector or industry, we need to put the pieces of the puzzle together in a way that makes the best sense commercially for a particular market and its particular energy needs. And many of the puzzle pieces need to help customers can be found already at Shell, from the integrated power to e-mobility to nature-based solutions, hydrogen, and digital services and platforms that help simplify our customers' decarbonization journey, which we call at Shell power as a service. So that's on Shell and our sustainability from me, Leslie. Over to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Beata. That was a very wide sweeping program and certainly something that did not happen overnight.
It is
So
truly a journey. It is truly a journey, and journey of collaboration, where we can deliver together.
absolutely. And we have, as you said, two of your partners here today, virtually at least, sitting side by side. And I think it's an interesting group in that respect. So let's see, Jan Kristian, why don't you give us an overview on what DB Schenker is doing around sustainability?
Well, Schenker, as a large global player, we have big responsibility to help improve social and environmental conditions for our current and future generations. At the same time, our customers, employees, and society at large increasingly expect more from us, making sustainability a business imperative. Sustainability at DB Schenker goes beyond one single department or topic. We take a holistic approach covering a variety of social, environmental, and business topics, all to ensure we are resilient and future ready as a company. We have an ambition to become the sustainability leader in our industry and proactively integrate the UN Sustainable Development Goals into our sustainability strategy. Our aim is to lead our industry in driving climate action, providing fair work opportunities, and developing sustainable logistic solutions. And I think it's really important what Beata said. This is a partnership. This is collaboration, which is going to make this sustainable transition really a success.
Okay, great. All right, Martyn, let's turn over to you at DHL.
Thank you, Leslie. And I think as we have discussed already on this call for the viewers, there is a complete alignment here. I'm fortunate to be part of one of the largest logistics companies in the world, and also fortunate to work with Shell and Beata directly. I think from a DPDHL perspective, again, great timing, Leslie, in that we've just announced our sustainability strategy and put the roadmap out for public consumption, which really the pinnacle of that is carbon neutral, absolutely identical to the Shell strategy by 2050. And it is a journey, right? I think we'll talk later in this call about the broader subject in terms of sustainability and what that means for DHL. But really, that goes beyond the clean fuels and clean energy and climate protection. For us, sustainability is really about being a great company to work in, and also a highly trusted partner. And I think for us, I'd be quite interested in the team's views here on their broader view of sustainability as we get into the discussion.
All right, I have just a quick question I'd like to just go around our group with. When you're from the forwarder side, when you're bidding on a project, how important is sustainability and what you're doing as a company to those that are reviewing, say, the projects or the proposals? And Beata, from your view as a shipper, when you're looking at suppliers, how important are their sustainability goals and processes?
So first of all, I'll start from the basics, which to me is our relationship contractually first. And in our contracts, we do have a requirement agreed requirement, mutually agreed requirement for sustainability, for reporting, and for making sure that we actually do something with the reporting itself. So we start from the basics. And then when we request for the inputs into our bids, into our RFQs, into our tenders, we look into sustainability. But again, this is a journey, right? So if I ask our partners, our freight forwarders to provide solutions, there must be these solutions in existence. And this is not an easy journey to always find these solutions, and especially to projects that they are perhaps in very complex localizations, that geographies that they not necessarily are quite mature, quite yet there. So our role, in my view, is to collaborate in such a way that we create this journey and solutions together, and then we bring up to speed those that they are perhaps not yet understanding or appreciating the value of sustainability yet so much. So that would be my kind of a few words on it.
Great, that's fantastic. Yeah, Martyn.
Yeah, and I was going to say, just to pick up on a few points that Beata raised, from a sustainability point of view, it's also, I mean, Beata's in an extractive industry, and I joined DHL from an extractive industry, and you have to look at the legacy that you're leaving in the communities that you operate, Leslie. So it goes beyond just the emissions. It's, what are you doing to engage with the local community? What are you doing in terms of your trade and development locally? What are you doing in terms of the lasting, as I say, the lasting legacy working in that community? And DHL, I think, have got a number of, let's say, goals in that regard. We have our Go Green strategy, which is obviously underpins the climate change and the carbon neutral by 2050. We have our Go Trade team that are looking at how to engage with the local commerce and how to actually bring that into our overall strategy. And our people are giving back to the communities through our Go Teach program. We've been associated with the International SOS Children's Village for over the last 10 years, and our employees are going back into the community and giving these life skills to the communities that they work and live in. So again, the broader topic is how do we bring these things to Shell and our other customers, and it underpins the fact that they are also in an aligned strategy around sustainability.
Yeah.
Okay, Jan, Kristian, what are your thoughts on that? Do you see that coming up in the vetting or bid process for projects? And is that something that you bring to the fore if it isn't, apparent? Is that something that you as a company find important and push that forward as a benefit?
Definitely, and we see actually sustainability as a competitive advantage in certain markets and in certain areas. I will come back to some of those, let's say, examples that we have just created here in Norway over the last couple of years, which has been a fantastic journey. But it's the sustainability topic. It's a little bit like pioneering in logistics, because we have the interaction with our clients. It's the technology companies. It's not only about the environmental impact. It's also, like Martyn mentioned here, about the social footprint that we leave in the different societies and communities. And that's a very important aspect of sustainability within sustainability.
Okay, let's move on to another question. How ready are shippers to make sustainability their goal for logistics delivery?
I think, Leslie, maybe until there's a price of carbon built in, which is something that obviously the policy setters and the bureaucrats all put in place. But I think, from what I can see in the market, as consumers, we have a choice, right? We have a choice who we put our business with, and it's the same for our customers from a DHL point of view. I mean, they come to DHL as a trusted partner, whether that's through experience or through filling a niche in their particular supply chain. And again, you look at our footprint from a DHL point of view, we're operating in 220 countries. And again, we can use the strength of that global network to ensure that we're taking advantage of synergies in that supply chain. As I sat in Beata's role, as I say, in a former life, and my boss said to me, we might have the lowest cost to go from A to B, but why do we go there 10 times when we should only be going there 5 times, right? So there's the cost of the actual movement itself, but also the optimization, which will ultimately have an impact on the footprint, right?
Yeah. So maybe I can step in and say how ready we are at Shell and what we are doing. So we've been on that transformation journey, and we are transforming to become a net zero energy business by 2050. And it seems to be far away, but actually it's not. And we want to do it in step with the society, as young Kristian and Martyn mentioned. In the energy transition journey, actually, we believe that we can contribute to innovate and generate the cleaner energy system with our knowledge and skills at Shell. But we need to truly do it together. So we work closely with our employees first of all, and then partners with our customers and suppliers and communities, and also policymakers. And the transition is underway. It will move to a different places at different pace even, and produce maybe even different outcomes in these different countries. But it all depends on the local factors. So I would like to mention actually a few examples here. In Shell, we linked the pay of more than 16,500 staff to our target to reduce the carbon intensity of our energy products by 6 to 8% by 2023. So we are not waiting, we are doing it already now. And that is compared to 2016 numbers. Following the renewed course of Shell worldwide, then Shell Netherlands recently introduced 5 new goals for the future with cleaner energy and strong economy, which goes back to the society subject. We continue working with our sales and operations planning on demand signaling to establish and optimize required logistics supply and improve or continue improving our short, medium, and long-term forecasting as well. We leverage on direct to customers communication to better assess and manage that demand and create sustainable options together with them. Not only for actually our direct customers, but also for their clients, so customers of customers. And we have been on a journey of inventory optimization that helps us to take a decision whether we need to order new stock or not. And when needed, we also preserve our materials and equipment to avoid reordering, which then generates, of course, the need of transportation and so on. And then our SMEs from Shell work with the industry on innovative solutions such as battery on board, 3D printing, equipment transportability assessment, and so on. So it is truly a journey and journey together.
Okay. I think, young Kristian, you have a case that you can share with us that'll give us a sort of a concrete look at how this plays out.
Yeah. At DB Schenker, we opened its Oslo City Hub. It's an area of approximately 500 square meters. It's in the capital of Norway in 2019. The Oslo City Hub is a true hub which all deliveries within the city center are made using electric vehicles, electric bikes. With this hub, Schenker has reduced its CO2 emissions from inner city deliveries to Oslo to zero. The use of some 40 electric vehicles enables 800 locally emission-free deliveries to be made each day in Oslo. That is fantastic. On a global scale, DB Schenker is pursuing the goal of reducing a specific greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 as compared to 2006. The implementation of the sustainable urban logistics concept in Oslo represents an important milestone on the way to achieving these goals.
So, Jan Kristian, I want to ask a question then. Would you then conclude that every little action matters?
Every little action matters, and at the end of the day, it is really about collaboration and partnering also, because we have to consider that we have non-governmental policymakers, we have technology developments, and with this, let's say, the pioneering for the Oslo City Hub, that was for Schenker, that is back in 2019. Now we're 2021. We are rolling out this now to all bigger cities in Oslo, no, in Norway for 2021. We have an ambition that we have this inner city zero emission solution set up by the end of 2021. So yes, I would say that each step matters, but collaboration. I come back to this. I think collaboration and partnering and understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses, both as a customer and supplier, but also from let's say, infrastructure perspective. And what is the technology available today, and what would the technology be available in the years to come? Because what we're seeing from a technology perspective in 2021, in 2025, we're going to see completely re-ramped drivers again.
And I think to complement that, Leslie, if you look at the speed of change, I mean, I saw some statistics just last week in terms of the new cars being procured across Europe. I think Norway, Sweden, Iceland are leading the way, where it's almost in some cases 50% of all new cars purchased are either hybrid or electric. And you know, who would have thought that a decade ago, right? So as Jan Kristian said, I mean, the collaboration piece is really around if you look at the LNG and shipping, right, and you look at technology, we still have a way to go in terms of technology catching up, you know, to reach our aspirational targets. But I think you know, this is a journey, right? We don't have all the solutions today, and I think you know, from a DPDHL point of view, the reason that we set the goal of zero emissions by 2050 is really to have those aspirational targets, and then to inspire the commerce to find the solutions, and that goes back to what you said, Beata, earlier, that it is a partnership. So there's you need logistics providers to move your goods for your production facilities, but at the same time we need the Shells of the world to be investing in cleaner technology and cleaner fuels to provide that. So it is a cycle, right? And from that perspective, we are seeing that already impact industry. In the last 12 months, we've launched our LCL service, where that's completely carbon neutral, right? So we're giving our customers a choice on in terms of the actual service, and then the impact, and whether that's reducing the emissions or whether that's offsetting. At this moment in time, it's a combination of both, right?
I was actually sorry, Leslie. I was actually thinking, Martyn, in preparation for this session. What is truly, really my expectation now and for the future as well, from partners that I work with, and going to be able to collaborate, I think, and then co-develop that journey to sustainability in logistics, and actually in a wider supply chain as well, is truly important. And I think because you started mentioning products like LCL. So I was thinking, examples. What are the examples of that kind of milestone that we can put on that journey? And I think for me and for my business, creating transparency of options and transparency of trade-offs, such as time, cost, and CO2 emissions across multi-tier supply chain. So it's not only one level, it's really truly multi-tier is truly important. Looking at the product life from
Yes.
the design to disposal with raw materials and energy inputs included throughout that life, truly important.
And just
Enabling, yeah, go on.
sorry, Beata. No, I was going to say, and look, it all depends on what you measure as well. From a
Yeah.
DPDHL point of view, we measure well to wheel, right? And from that perspective, Leslie, for those that don't know the terminology, we actually measure our CO2 emissions, not just about when we actually start to consume the fuel, but actually the CO2 that's been generated to actually produce the fuel. So when you look at the DPDHL statistics, we're actually measuring it, including the CO2 emissions that have been, as I say, produced as a result of producing the fuel. But back to what you said, Beata, I think it does lend itself to greater collaboration across the industry. And from our perspective, and again, Leslie, it's something that we can follow up with the viewers here today, that we actually have a carbon calculator. So to Beata's point, you can put the mode into the system. That's something that's available online, and you can get access to that and calculate the CO2 emissions depending on the mode that you choose, whether that's air freight, rail, road freight. So again, that's something that we can make available to the viewers here after the call.
Okay, just to interject for a moment, if we look at this as a journey, quickly, don't think too much about it, and the end of the journey, which we know it's not really the end at 2050, but we have goals at 2050, right? What percentage of progress, say on a scale of 1 to 100, you just have to give me a number, do you think, where are we as an industry? Beata.
You mean right now?
Right now.
25.
25. Jan Kristian.
I'm not going to be that optimistic, unfortunately.
That's okay.
Yeah, I think we have quite a long journey to go. So I'm going to say 20%.
20. So I've got 25, 20. Martyn.
I would say from a DHL perspective, we're probably further up that journey. So probably somewhere near 30%. Yeah.
Okay, and how about as an industry, not just as a company?
As an industry, yeah, I'd probably tend to agree that it's probably a lot lower than 30. So yeah, the consensus would be somewhere around the 20% mark. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, that kind of gives us, a place to start. So what can the industry do to accelerate the journey? Within our industry, within oil and gas, logistics, transportation of the components it takes to, build an offshore wind project or whatever that might be. When you think about the elements that you work with, maybe name up to 3 things that you think could accelerate our goals that we have put in place for 2050.
Who wants to go first?
I can go first. Go first.
Great.
I think going back to my earlier comment on transparency, and actually, Jan Kristian, it ties nicely with what you said about systems. So creating visibility of options, trade-offs for project, but for anyone, actually, for any user of logistics or supply chain, that will already create a good way forward, being clear on the decarbonization pathways, sector by sector, what is available there in the market, how Shell can help DHL and Schenker and vice versa. How we can help each other to create that journey. I think, again, going back to transparency, that would be my second point. And then I think that, while each industry we need own solutions, there are some common steps actually to be able to reduce their carbon emissions. And one is being more energy efficient. So how do we do it? How are we going to be more energy efficient? Using lower carbon energy products and solutions. That's another one. And then how do we capture this unavoidable greenhouse gas emissions using the technology or nature, and having the transparency and then a will to work together to understand and co-create solutions, and listen to one another, listen to society, listen to communities, to the governments, to customers. I think this is truly important. So sheer will, as well as, having the goals, I think it's critical.
And maybe to go back to Leslie, what I was saying earlier, I think the collaboration, maybe there's a question mark over how fast, but I mean the broader sustainability topic. When we talk about compliance, as Beata mentioned earlier in the call, you've also got the topic about different industries moving into geographically where there's development needs to happen. So there's a risk in terms of the skill set. So again, going back to the broader sustainability topic as opposed to just the carbon emissions. And again, health and safety. I mean, we all work in this project environment, right? And our ultimate goal is whether it's our contractors or whether our staff go home injury-free after a day's work, right? So again, what are we doing? I mean, there's lots of good collaboration between the logistics industry and oil and gas industry in terms of the life-saving rules and actually those sharing best practices. And if you think about the journey the companies like Shell are on in terms of going into renewables, whether it's solar or wind, then these skills are transferable, right? So again, from a 3PL or logistics perspective, Leslie, I mean, and Jan, I'd be interested in your view. I mean, as we've seen the different industries develop, we've certainly transferred those skills from a project forwarding perspective, whether that's oil and gas, mining, renewables, and that applies, as I say, at the company level, where health and safety is also a core part of your sustainable future.
I think you're into a real interesting aspect here, Martyn, and the life-saving rules, the HSE focus that we see in our environment. It has a target and ambition for zero harm during our operations, and I think that putting in place policies that bring the same attention into sustainability as a concept like HSE and life-saving rules could, from our industry perspective, really accelerate the journey. Yeah, absolutely.
If we could measure, as we publicize, how many air freight tons that we move, or how many FCL boxes that we move, if everyone was measuring to the same standard in terms of our CO2 emissions, and as I say, whether that's well to wheel or it would be interesting, Jan, as you said, that would be the I guess the nirvana that everyone's measuring on the same basis, and there's that degree of transparency, right?
But actually, I want to add one more thing. For me, as an employee of Shell and working with the assets and with projects as well, for me it is critical to sit down with you guys and have a look at the root causes that led my counterparts in assets and projects to select one solution over the other one. I really like to have KPIs and a baseline, because I think this will drive the change as well towards the targets that we have. But I do think that we have to simply sit down and work together out there. What do we do with these KPIs that we see? Why my business is choosing a solution over another one. What's the root cause of it? And truly sit down, understand, and have a dialogue. And then, what are the solutions to how we can change that behavior as well, if it is not the one that leads us towards the targets.
I think that we're now into one of the topics that Leslie mentioned a little bit earlier. What is the let's say the key decision makers for choosing solution A, B, or C? And I think that in many cases it is two other options rather than sustainability that is actually the decision making. And this has to do with the change of mindset, I believe, and we are definitely on that journey. And it has to do with collaboration, partnership. How do we understand the drivers that we as partners need to meet to have a sustainable future?
Exactly, but also sustainable future as a company, right? So when I think about our aims, our goals, it's one of them is generating shareholder value. So for you as well, you want to generate shareholder value. Of course, we want to respect the nature. Of course, that's one of the fundamentals for goals that we have, and achieve net zero emissions and power the lives of people. But one of them is actually shareholder value. So how to create solutions in this ecosystem together with the governments that no longer impose or request us to do something or follow, and we want to be compliant, but actually support us in that activity as well. For us to become the company that not only protects the environment, respects the nature, and creates the zero emission pathway to achieve the target in 2050, but also simply generates the value to the shareholders.
And I think if we haven't mentioned in this call the reason that we're having this obviously this virtual event is in lieu of obviously what's happening around us in terms of the global pandemic. And if you look at taking the discussion, Leslie, back to the collaboration. If you look at the progress on the vaccines over the last 24 months and the speed that around a common cause, there's no reason why we can't apply that same vigor in terms of the climate change. That's really going to be for with the greatest respect to our participants today. It's going to be for the generations to come that we need to make the changes now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wanted to ask another one of my quick questions. Does sustainability always mean increased costs?
No. I mean, for me personally, as I said, the example of we could be doing a lot more in terms of coming back to, again, something that Beata said about making informed decisions as a, for our customers and the shippers in terms of consolidating cargo, right? So that's ultimately a more sustainable way to move cargo, and that's what we do every day. And it really is about having access to the data to make the right decisions. So it's just one example, but in short, no, doesn't come at an increased cost, quite the contrary.
I agree. I define sustainability as really working in the integrated ecosystem with my company and other companies and suppliers and the governments to meet the changing expectations of society and to provide the next generation with wider range of options. And I don't think that even the a few examples that I've read, or actually today I've read about a great example in Africa, how we leveraged existing mechanisms to offset carbon activity. So no, I don't agree with this, but I think we do need support from this ecosystem and including policymakers.
Okay, young Kristian, what are your thoughts?
Real profound. We need to go forward as role models and take responsibility. And with some of the technology that we're seeing today, the sustainable solution might actually be at a lower cost. And looking in the future, let's take an example as aviation fuel towards some of the airlines. Today, the cost for having aviation fuel, the sustainable fuel, it is more costly. But at the end of the day, this has to do, again, role modeling, going forward as a good example. And I think, again, together, collaboration with our customers and partners, I think we can take ownership of this journey and really drive this. Being in the driver's seat rather than seeing what happens. We as a company and the other panelists here also are working for companies that are really in the driver's seat and want to make the change and have a clear sustainability strategy focus, both from an environmental point of view, regarding the communities that we have been discussing, but also shared values. Talking about resilient supply chains is one example.
And I think they are also quite simple examples, like modal changes, for example, right? That would shift you from, I don't know, trucking to rail. Rail not necessarily needs to be more expensive, but it might take longer to move. And so for me and for my business to have the visibility of these trade-offs that I was speaking earlier about, you know, the cost, the time, and the CO2 emissions, this is so critical to make the right choices, because we all know that in my environment, moving something by air is likely to be most expensive and actually produce the most CO2 emission in the current environment. So do I want to do it? No, but sometimes I have to. So there are situations where we'll have to use the solution that, well, it's expensive, and emergency situations, for example, would be such an example where we would be using an airplane mode of transport. But then can I counteract, and by right planning, good forecasting, can I avoid such transport if it is not an emergency situation? Of course I can.
Yeah.
And that's where we are going to as well, to be not only good citizens outside, but also inside, to create robust models to provide that good citizenship, you know, and sustainable performance outside.
I think that the CO2 emission factor that Martyn mentioned earlier, I think it is a very important aspect to it. It gives you a clear overview over what is the emissions for each mode of transportation.
Yeah.
And for a shipper to also have that accessible into their day-to-day life and have that as one of their measurements also, I think it's essential for the future and today.
But I guess it comes back to being able to share that data, right? So I think it's something that we you know, if we were booking a flight online, you can offset your carbon if you or I were doing it as a consumer, but we need to start to make sure that that's shared. And again, maybe we haven't talked about that, Leslie, but there's also the not just the measurement, but the investment in technology within the logistics industry, right? So Beata talked about better planning, in terms of the demand management, but what happens, ultimately when the responsibility to move those goods in your role, Beata, is actually in the hands of your suppliers, right? So again, what we're seeing is certainly a shift in our customers taking more responsibility, Leslie, for their logistics, and that's good for us because quite clearly, Beata and her team go to great lengths to qualify their partners, and then it's such a shame when in those instances that some of the procurement decisions around the logistics are not in the hands of the logistics team. So I think we are seeing that in terms of the companies taking more of a hands-on approach in terms of who actually moves their goods, and that's as I say, something we'd continue to encourage, because we can't demand, or we can't manage the demand management if there's so much fragmented logistics spend, right? And that's key. I mean, so you can only manage what you know about, and you can't manage what you don't know about, right?
Yeah, and I want to bring very quickly one example from our recent considerations where we are looking inwards on what we can do, how important it is to have a distinction between the source and transparency as well, between the source location and the country of origin. You can, by having just this transparency, you can design your network in such a way that it's not only time and cost more efficient and effective, but actually produces less CO2 emissions. So really every detail matters. It's to really understand which is the factor and that contributes to, for my company, to and as well for the transport companies, logistics companies, that generates the level of emissions, and how to then work around it to reduce it.
Okay. I wanted, before our time is up, I did want to be able to just, Beata, have you talk a little bit about the Shell Energy Transition Hub?
Yeah, thanks. Great stuff. It is called the Hub as well, and it is a collaborative and learning digital platform that helps suppliers to define and estimate their emissions reduction ambition. So the hubs allows Shell partners in the supply chain to share the data and work together on lowering the carbon emissions. It is actually not a calculator, which makes it different from the majority of decarbonization platforms currently on offer. It works on the premise of collating the corporate emissions data, provided and mapping out potential pathways to reaching the desired ambition within the time frame. So it focuses is on industry specific, and thus allows it to make comparisons based on the relevant sector. The platform will facilitate Shell working together with our suppliers to provide the alternative low carbon energy solutions, as well as jointly developed those innovative responses to accelerate the energy transition. Its primary focus is actually on the reduction of Scope 3 emissions, which is critical as emissions from the end use of Shell energy products account for over 90% of our total emissions. And through the hub, we can amplify our ability as Shell to cooperate in assisting the supply chain in progressing the energy transition journey. Be it actually between Shell and one of the suppliers, or even between the suppliers themselves. And as our supply chains, which I mentioned before, are very diverse and in different places and geographies, and they range from multinational corporations to smaller regional and local companies as well. The platform is designed to enable us to work across the spectrum, the whole spectrum. This means that we can also collaborate with smaller companies that may not know their emissions profile, for example, and can only estimate or assume their carbon footprint. Even with their assumed emissions profile, we can start mapping out the decarbonization ambitions and journey together with them.
Okay. All right. I think we're about to the end of our time. I think this discussion has been extraordinarily insightful and encouraging. We're hearing that it's a journey, but the thing that really sticks out to me from this is the collaboration. So I want to thank the three of you for setting this example and showing how competitors can collaborate with a major corporation and how you're all working together. So I think that sets a fantastic example for achieving the industry's sustainability goals as we move forward. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you.